Hi, I'm Joanne Caldwell, 54 years old, living by myself in my beachfront house on Longboat Key, Florida. That Friday night, I was just finishing dinner alone as usual when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and my whole family was standing there without a single text or call. Beforehand, my parents, my younger sister Courtney, her husband Blake, and three massive suitcases they dragged straight into my foyer like they already owned the place. They didn't even ask. They just walked in, parked the bags, and sat down at my dining table. Halfway through the meal, Courtney looked up totally casual and said, "Tomorrow morning, I want breakfast on the table at exactly 5 a.m. Blake gets up early, and he likes everything done his way. You're the homeowner, Joanne. So that's your job, right?" My parents smiled and nodded like she'd just asked for extra ketchup. I felt my jaw tighten, but I just smiled back and said, "Sure, no problem." I excused myself, walked into the kitchen, and stared at the clock ticking on the wall. 5 a.m. Fine. I set my alarm for 4, picked up my phone, and ordered the strongest extra-strength morning cleanse tea with same-day delivery. They wanted breakfast at 5. I was going to give them a wake-up call they would never, ever forget. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your state in the comments and tell me, has anyone in your family ever shown up unannounced and started acting like they run your house? I'm reading every single comment, so don't hold back. They didn't even pretend to ask. Courtney dropped her Louis Vuitton weekender right in the foyer, kicked off her sandals, and announced, "Blake and I are taking the master on the east side. The sunrise view is better for his morning routine." My parents followed with their rolling suitcases like it was the most natural thing in the world. Dad gave me a quick side hug and said, "We'll take the blue guest suite, honey. Same one we stayed in last Christmas." Last Christmas, they had come for 3 days, left the fridge empty, and Mom complained the entire time that the guest bed was too firm. I swallowed the memory and forced a smile. By the time we sat down to eat, the dynamic was already set. Blake held court at the head of the table, my father's old spot. He poured himself a heavy glass of the Cabernet I'd been saving, swirled it like he belonged there, and started talking property values on Longboat Key, the way other people talk about the weather. "You know, this stretch alone is worth north of 8 figures now," he said, gesturing toward the Gulf like he'd built it himself. "One owner, no mortgage, paid off clean after the divorce settlement. That's extremely rare." Mom beamed at him. "Blake's been studying the market here for months. He says people are literally begging for lots with this kind of frontage." Courtney leaned over, resting her chin on Blake's shoulder. "We were thinking, sis, you're rattling around in all this space by yourself. Why not carve off the north acre, put in a spec house, and let Blake handle the sale? The commission alone would set Mom and Dad up for years." Dad nodded eagerly. "Social Security barely covers the property taxes on the Ohio house anymore. Inflation's killing us." I set my fork down. "You want to subdivide my land?" "Not subdivide," Blake corrected smoothly. "Strategic monetization. You keep the main house, keep your privacy, and still walk away with 7 figures after fees. Everybody wins." Courtney reached across the table and squeezed my hand like we were still teenagers sharing secrets. "Come on, Joe. You don't even use the back 2 bedrooms. We could turn one into an office for Blake. He works remotely anyway. It makes total sense for us to spend more time down here. Family should stick together." Mom chimed in. "Your father and I always said this house was too big for one person. Remember when you first bought it? We told you it was extravagant." I remembered. I also remembered wiring them $3,200 every month for the last 10 years so they wouldn't lose their own home up north. I remembered paying for Courtney's destination wedding in Napa, the down payment on her SUV, the emergency root canal last spring. None of that seemed to count tonight. Blake refilled his glass and leaned back. "Look, Joanne, I'm not trying to pressure you, but opportunities like this don't wait. I already have 2 cash buyers from New York circling. One phone call and we could have letters of intent by Monday." Dad looked at me with that familiar mix of pride and expectation. "It's not like you have kids to leave it to. Might as well spread the wealth while we're all still here to enjoy it." The words landed harder than any slap. No kids, no husband. Just me and 8,000 square feet of oceanfront silence they suddenly wanted a piece of. I stood up to clear plates nobody had finished. "I'll think about it," I said, which everyone in the room knew meant no. Courtney rolled her eyes. "You always say that." Then nothing changes. Blake gave her a tiny shake of the head, the universal husband signal for drop it. He smiled at me instead, all perfect teeth and practiced warmth. "No rush. We're here for the week. Plenty of time to go over numbers." A week? They had decided to stay a week without asking. I loaded the dishwasher while they moved to the living room, already discussing where to put the Christmas tree if they started coming every year. Mom asked if the outdoor kitchen still worked. Dad wanted to know if the boat lift was operational. Courtney laughed about throwing parties for Blake's investor friends. I slipped out through the side door and walked down the path to the beach. The tide was coming in loud and indifferent. I stood there until my feet went numb in the wet sand. 12 years ago, I signed those divorce papers in a conference room in Tampa and used every cent of my settlement to buy this house cash because I wanted something nobody could ever take away from me again. Tonight, it felt like I was already losing it. When I finally came back inside, the lights upstairs were off, except for the master suite they had claimed. I could hear Courtney's muffled giggle through the walls, Blake's low voice answering. My parents' snores drifted down the hallway. I poured myself a glass of water, stared at my reflection in the dark window, and realized something that made my stomach twist worse than any detox tea ever could. They weren't guests. They had come to stay. The alarm went off at 4 sharp. I was already wide awake, heart pounding harder than it had in years. I slipped out of bed, threw on a robe, and padded barefoot down the staircase to the kitchen. The house was dead quiet except for the low hum of the fridge and the waves crashing outside. I started pulling everything out like I was running a 5-star brunch service. Fresh sourdough from the bakery down the road went into the toaster with garlic butter. Eggs into the pan for soft-boiled exactly 6 minutes. Strawberries, blueberries, mango slices arranged on a white platter. Orange juice squeezed by hand. The good Colombian coffee beans ground fresh. Then I opened the small brown package that had arrived yesterday afternoon. Extra strength morning detox tea. Deep cleanse formula. The label warned in tiny print, not recommended to exceed 1 bag per day. I dropped 6 bags into the biggest teapot I owned, poured boiling water and let it steep until it turned almost black. The smell was sharp, almost medicinal, but I told myself it was just strong herbs. Nothing more. By 4:50, the table looked perfect. White linen napkins folded like restaurant style. Silverware lined up. The detox pot sitting innocently next to the coffee carafe. At 5 o'clock on the dot, I heard footsteps thundering down the stairs. Blake was first, hair still wet from the shower, wearing workout shorts like he owned the gym membership to my life. Courtney followed in silk pajamas, yawning dramatically. My parents shuffled in last, Mom clutching her robe, Dad already complaining the air conditioning was too cold. Blake surveyed the spread and actually clapped once. "Now that's what I call service. Look at this, babe. Your sister went all out." Courtney slid into the chair at the head of the table, the one I usually sit in, and poured herself a huge mug of the detox tea without asking what it was. "Finally, someone around here understands hospitality," she said, taking a long sip. "This tastes healthy." "Good job, Joanne." Mom and Dad both reached for the teapot too. Dad even joked, "If it keeps me regular at my age, sign me up." I stood by the island, arms folded, watching them drink like it was just another Saturday. Blake refilled his mug twice. Courtney kept saying how energized she already felt. My parents finished the whole pot between them, asking for seconds on the eggs. I said nothing. Just smiled and cleared a few crumbs. 40 minutes later, the first sound came from Blake. A low groan. He shifted in his chair, pressed a hand to his stomach, and muttered something about indigestion. 30 seconds after that, he bolted upright, face suddenly pale, and made a beeline for the downstairs powder room. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the hinges. Courtney laughed at first. "Drama king," she teased. Then her own eyes widened. She clapped a hand over her mouth, pushed back from the table, and sprinted upstairs, shouting my name like I'd done something to her on purpose. Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at Mom. Both of them started sweating at the same time. Mom gripped the edge of the table, whispering, "Ron, I don't feel right." Dad tried to stand, wobbled, and sat back down hard. The noises coming from both bathrooms were unmistakable. Non-stop flushing, doors banging. Someone, I think Courtney, actually yelled, "What the hell did you put in that tea?" I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, voice perfectly calm. "Yes, hi. I have 2 elderly people here experiencing severe stomach distress and dehydration. Possible food reaction. We need paramedics." I gave the address, hung up, and turned to my parents. "Sit tight. Help is coming." The ambulance arrived in under 8 minutes, lights flashing across the driveway. 2 paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. They took one look at Mom curled over, clutching her abdomen, and Dad doubled on the couch and went straight into action. IV fluids, vitals, the works. They loaded my parents and sped off with sirens blaring. Blake and Courtney weren't far behind in Blake's SUV. I watched from the front door as they peeled out, Courtney hanging halfway out the passenger window looking green. Later that morning, the ER doctor called me herself. "Your family members are stable but extremely dehydrated and in significant gastrointestinal distress. They all drank the same extra-strength herbal cleanse tea, correct?" I told her yes. I thought it was just a strong detox blend. She sighed through the phone. "Ma'am, 6 bags in 1 pot is basically a laxative overdose. They'll be on IV fluids most of the day, but they'll live." I thanked her, hung up, and stood alone in the suddenly silent house. The breakfast dishes were still on this table. The teapot sat empty. For the first time all weekend, I smiled for real. The front door slammed shut behind the last ambulance, and the house fell into a silence I hadn't heard in years. No voices, no footsteps, no demands. Just the low hum of the AC and the distant roll of waves. I walked straight to the guest room Blake and Courtney had claimed. His black leather weekender was still open on the bench at the foot of the bedclothes, half spilling out in their rush to the hospital. I hesitated for half a second, then knelt and started pulling everything out. Under a stack of folded golf shirts was a thick manila folder secured with a rubber band. My name was written on the tab in neat block letters, J. Caldwell, Longboat Key. My pulse jumped so hard I felt it in my throat. Inside were hundreds of photographs of my house, some taken from the water, some from the street, some through the windows at night. The earliest was date-stamped 18 months ago. 18 months. He'd been watching this place long before Courtney ever mentioned bringing him here. Next came a power of attorney form already notarized, granting Blake Reed full authority to list and sell my property. My parents' signatures were at the bottom, their shaky but unmistakable scrawl, dated 3 months earlier. I recognized Mom's looping capital D and Dad's cramped R. They had signed my house away without ever saying a word to me. There was a Delaware LLC formation packet, Gulf Coast Premier Holdings LLC, with Blake listed as sole manager. Then a printed spreadsheet titled Closed Transactions, Last 5 years, 27 rows, 27 properties, 27 elderly owners. The column headers read like a predator's checklist: owner, age, net worth, marital status, known heirs. My name was already entered in row 28. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the folder. Tucked in the back pocket was a single business card with a handwritten phone number on the back. The front read, Melissa Coleman, Mobile, Alabama. I knew that name. Courtney had once mentioned Blake's crazy ex who accused him of stealing her house. I'd laughed it off at the time. I grabbed my phone and dialed before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the second ring. "Hello, Melissa. This is Joanne Caldwell. I'm Courtney Reed's older sister. I think we need to talk about Blake." There was a long pause, then a bitter laugh. "You found the folder, didn't you?" 20 minutes later, I knew everything. Blake had swept into Melissa's life 6 years ago, love-bombed her for 6 months, convinced her to refinance her paid-off home to invest in a flip together, then disappeared with the equity the day the check cleared. She lost the house, her savings, and almost her freedom when the bank foreclosed. She still had the police reports, the quit-claim deed with her forged signature, the whole paper trail. She emailed it all while we were still on the phone. I asked if there were others. She gave me one more name, Margaret Ellison, 82, mobile again. Margaret picked up on the first ring, voice trembling but sharp. Blake had charmed her into selling her childhood home for a quarter of its value so he could help her move into a nice assisted living community. The community never existed. She now lived in a state-funded nursing facility with nothing but a single suitcase to her name. She cried when I told her I had the same folder. She sent photos of the fraudulent purchase agreement within minutes. I photographed every page of Blake's folder front and back, uploaded the entire set to a secure cloud drive, then emailed copies to my estate attorney in Sarasota with the subject line, "Urgent. Possible fraud involving my parents." I added Melissa's and Margaret's contact info and asked him to loop in whatever law enforcement contacts he had. Then I opened the safe hidden behind the panel in my office closet, slid the original folder inside, and spun the dial. Whatever happened next, the evidence was locked down. I walked back downstairs and stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the couch where my parents had been sitting just hours earlier, sipping that tea and smiling like nothing was wrong. They had signed my house away. My mother, who still called me every Sunday to remind me to eat vegetables. My father, who cried when I paid off their mortgage 10 years ago. They had looked me in the eye last night and talked about spreading the wealth while Blake already held the pen they'd used to betray me. The betrayal hit harder than the anger. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed until I couldn't breathe. I poured myself a glass of water with shaking hands and stood at the kitchen island, staring at the breakfast dishes still scattered across the table. The detox teapot sat empty, innocent-looking. I knew one thing for certain: when they all came back through that door, everything was going to change. And this time, I would be ready. The doorbell rang again while the sun was dropping behind the gulf, turning the sky blood orange. I opened it, and there stood my older brother Travis, still in his Houston work boots, duffel slung over one shoulder, eyes blazing. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "What the hell, Joanne? Mom's on the phone crying that you tried to kill everybody with some poison tea. Dad can barely talk. Courtney says you've lost your mind. I got the first flight out." Start explaining. I closed the door behind him and pointed to the kitchen island. "Sit. You're going to want to see this before you decide who's crazy." He dropped the bag, crossed his arms, and leaned against the counter like he was ready for a fight. I opened my laptop, turned the screen toward him, and clicked the first folder. The photos loaded one after another, my house from every angle, drone shots, night vision, some taken from the dunes across the street. The timestamp started 18 months back. Travis frowned. "Who took these? Keep going." Next folder. The power of attorney. My parents' signatures clear as day. The date 3 months ago. Notary stamp from a UPS store in Columbus, Ohio. His face changed. "That's Mom's handwriting." I clicked again. Screenshots of text messages between Blake and my mother. "Blake, just sign where the arrows are. Joanne will never know until it's done, and we're all taken care of. Mom. She won't even miss the money. She's got too much anyway." Travis's jaw tightened. I didn't stop. I opened the audio file I'd pulled from Mom's cloud backup she still doesn't know I have access to. Her voice tinny, but unmistakable. "After the sale, we split it 50-50. The girl lives alone. She doesn't need all that space. We raised her better than to be selfish." He stared at the screen for a long time. I let the silence stretch. Finally, he rubbed a hand over his face and whispered, "Jesus Christ." I opened the last folder, the spreadsheet with 27 names, ages, net worth estimates, and a column marked closed. My name sat in row 28, status in progress. Travis looked like someone had punched him in the chest. This is fraud. Elder fraud. Federal time. I nodded. Melissa Coleman already lost her house in Mobile. Margaret Ellison is 82 and living in a Medicaid facility because of him. I've got signed statements from both. He stood up, paced to the window, stared out at the darkening water. Mom and Dad signed that paper, they did. They knew. They knew enough. He turned back, eyes wet. I've been sending them money every month too, Joe. Not as much as you, but still. And all this time they were planning to sell your house out from under you. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Travis walked over, pulled me into a hug so tight my ribs creaked. I'm sorry. I flew down here ready to tear you a new one, and I'm the idiot. This stops tonight. We sat back down, and I walked him through everything again, slower this time, letting him read every line. When he finished Melissa's police report, he slammed the laptop shut and said, "We're calling the cops. Now." I already had the non-emergency number for Sarasota County Sheriff's Office pulled up. Travis took the phone from my hand and hit call. He put it on speaker. The detective who answered listened for 90 seconds, asked 3 sharp questions, then said, "Stay put. I'm sending 2 units and applying for an emergency search warrant. Do not touch anything else in that bag." 43 minutes later, 2 deputies and a detective were in my living room. Travis did most of the talking. I just handed over the external drive with every photo scan and recording time-stamped and backed up in triplicate. The detective scrolled through the evidence, face getting harder with every page. "This is more than enough for probable cause," he said. "Judge owes me a favor on a Sunday night. Warrant will be signed within the hour." While we waited, Travis and I walked the house together, room by room, activating every camera I'd installed after the divorce and never told anyone about. There were 12 in total: front door, back door, hallways, office, garage, even the dock. We set the system to silent alert, direct feed to the sheriff's dispatch. Travis tested the motion sensors himself, walking in and out of frame, until the detective's phone buzzed with confirmation: search warrant approved. Blake Reed, now officially a person of interest in multiple states. The detective looked at both of us. "If he comes back tonight, do not engage. Let us handle it." Travis gave a short nod. "We're not leaving the monitors." The deputies took positions outside. Travis poured us both coffee we didn't drink. We sat side by side in the dark office, screens glowing, watching empty hallways. For the first time since they'd arrived, I wasn't alone in my own house, and for the first time in years, I had my big brother back. The monitor in the office flashed red at 2:13 a.m. A single silent pulse, then the hallway feed showed the back door easing open. A figure in black slipped inside, baseball cap pulled low, latex gloves catching the faint glow of the nightlight. Blake. Travis and I froze in our chairs. 4 deputies, already suited up in vests, melted out of the guest room across the hall and took positions without a sound. On screen, Blake moved like he knew the house by heart. He avoided every creaky floorboard, kept to the shadows, and headed straight upstairs. The camera outside my office door caught him sliding a spare key, Courtney's copy, into the lock. The door opened with a soft click. He stepped inside, closed it behind him, and went directly to the bookshelf. His gloved fingers found the hidden panel in seconds. He knew exactly where the safe was. He'd probably watched me open it through a window months ago. He knelt, pulled a small pry bar from his backpack, and started working the dial. The safe beeped once, wrong combination. He cursed under his breath and tried again. That was the moment the adjoining closet door swung open. Police hands, where I can see them now. 4 red dots appeared on his chest. Blake dropped the pry bar, raised both arms, and turned slowly. The overhead light flipped on, blinding him. Travis stood in the doorway behind the deputy's, arms folded, staring at the man who had married our little sister. Blake's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "This is a misunderstanding. I just came for my things." One deputy spun him, patted him down, and cuffed him, while another read him his rights. The backpack was unzipped on the floor. Inside a loaded Glock with the serial number filed off 2 burner phones, a thick envelope of cash, a fake Florida driver's license under the name Brandon Cole, and a USB drive labeled Master List. The detective held the drive up between 2 fingers. 27 victims and counting Mr. Reed. We'll add attempted breaking and entering possession of an illegal firearm and whatever else we find on this stick. Blake tried the charm smile that had worked on my parents. Look, officers. My wife's family owns this house. I have every right to. Save it for the judge, the lead deputy cut in. We've got a signed search warrant and a live feed of you breaking in at 2 in the morning. You're done. They walked him past me in the hallway. His eyes met mine for half a second. No remorse, just pure calculation. Then he was gone down the stairs into the back of a cruiser, red and blue lights painting the palms outside. Travis closed the front door after the last deputy and leaned against it. He really thought he could just waltz in and clean up his mess. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. He almost did. The detective stayed behind to bag evidence. He pulled the USB, plugged it into his hardened laptop, and whistled low. Encrypted, but we'll crack it. Preliminary scan shows the full 27 files plus financials routed through 3 offshore accounts. He was planning to disappear to Cancun tomorrow night. Fake passport, one-way ticket, the works. Travis shook his head. How long were Mom and Dad in on this? Long enough to sign papers, I said. My voice sounded flat even to me. The detective sealed the backpack, labeled it, and handed me a receipt for every item. We'll need you both downtown later for formal statements, but you're safe to stay here tonight. Units will circle the block until sunrise. After they left, Travis and I stood in the kitchen, lights low, coffee finally poured. Neither of us spoke for a long time. He broke the silence first. I keep thinking about Christmas 2 years ago. Blake carved the turkey, told that story about closing a $10 million deal, and Mom looked at him like he hung the moon. I bought it. All of us did. I stared into my mug. I paid for that turkey. Travis reached across and covered my hand with his. Not anymore. We sat there until the sky outside turned gray, listening to gulls and the occasional patrol car rolling past. The house felt different now, lighter, like someone had opened every window and let the salt air blow the poison out. Blake was in a holding cell by dawn. The Glock alone added a mandatory 5 years federal. The USB added 27 counts of wire fraud and elder abuse across 3 states. The fake ID and cash made flight risk undeniable. Bail was denied before breakfast. Travis stretched, cracked his neck, and gave me a tired grin. You hungry? I make a mean omelet. I almost laughed. Almost. Let's order from the place on the circle. My treat. He nodded, understanding everything I couldn't say yet. Outside, the sun came up over the Gulf, bright and clean, the way it does after a hard storm has finally passed. The front door opened just after 9. Mom shuffled in first, pale and clutching her purse like a life raft. Dad followed, moving slow, eyes on the floor. Courtney came last, face blotchy from crying or rage, hard to tell anymore. They stopped in the kitchen doorway when they saw Travis and me already seated at the island. The locksmith's van was visible through the window parked in the driveway. Mom spoke first, voice trembling. Honey, we need to talk. Blake is in jail because of some terrible misunderstanding. You have to fix this. He's family. Dad nodded weakly. The detective said you gave them papers. Just tell them it was a mistake. We'll all go down together and clear it up. Courtney stepped forward, arms crossed tight. You owe us that much, Joanne. You owe us hospital bills, an apology to my husband, and you need to drop every charge right now. This is insane. I didn't move. Travis stayed silent beside me, letting me lead. I slid my phone across the marble and hit play. Mom's own voice filled the room. Once the closing happens, we split everything 50-50. She lives alone. She won't even notice until it's done. Another clip, Blake texting Dad. Have Diane sign page 4 and 5. Tell her it's just routine. Joanne trusts you. One more, Mom again recorded on her own cloud, laughing. After we cash out, we'll finally retire to Arizona like we always wanted. Courtney gets her share too. The color drained from Mom's face. Dad gripped the back of a chair. Courtney opened her mouth closed, it opened it again. I let the silence sit. Mom found her voice first small and pleading. We were in trouble, sweetheart. The house in Ohio is underwater. Reverse mortgage, credit cards, medical bills. We borrowed against everything. Blake said he could turn it around. He promised us a piece of the sale would fix everything. Dad added barely above a whisper. We never thought you'd find out until it was already done, and we were all safe. Courtney finally exploded. You're seriously doing this? You're choosing strangers over your own blood. Blake is sitting in a cell because you got hysterical over tea. I looked at her. Really looked for the first time in days. That tea saved my house, Courtney. And you still don't get it. Mom started crying harder. You've always had everything, Joanne. The settlement, this palace, no kids to support. We have nothing left. You can't turn your back on us now. I stood up slowly. I wired you $4,000 every month for 10 years. That's $480,000. I paid for your wedding, your car, your IVF that never happened, Dad's heart stent, Mom's cruises. I never asked for a thank you. I'm done. Dad tried next. Family forgives, honey. We made a mistake. We're old. We were scared. Courtney snarled. You're disgusting. You think money makes you better than us. Travis finally spoke, voice low and hard. No. She thinks betrayal has consequences. And she's right. Mom reached for my hand. I pulled away. I looked at each of them in turn. You signed my house away. You planned to take everything I built after my divorce and leave me with nothing. You taught me what family really means. Courtney laughed bitterly. So that's it? You're throwing us out like trash. Yes, I said. Starting today, I no longer have parents. I no longer have a sister. You are strangers who used to share my last name. Mom collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Dad just stared, mouth working soundlessly. Courtney started screaming something about lawsuits and ruining lives, but the words blurred into noise. I picked up my phone and dialed the locksmith who was already waiting outside. You can start now. Every lock, every gate, every code. I want it done by noon. The man walked in with his tool bag. Mom's crying turned into wails. Courtney lunged toward me. Travis stepped between us without effort. Dad tried one last time, voice cracking. Joanne, please. I met his eyes and felt nothing. Goodbye, Ronald. They stood there another 10 minutes while the locksmith worked in the background, metal grinding, new keys clinking. Mom kept begging. Courtney kept cursing. Dad kept repeating my name like it could still reach me. When the last deadbolt clicked into place, Travis opened the front door wide. Sunlight poured in. I spoke once more, calm and final. Your bags are in the foyer. The Uber I ordered is outside. It will take you to the Sarasota airport. One-way tickets to Columbus are on me. After that, you're on your own. Mom tried to hug me. I stepped back. Courtney spat on the floor as she passed. Dad paused on the threshold, shoulders shaking but never looked back. Travis closed the door behind them, turned the new key, and set the alarm. The house was quiet again. Really quiet this time. I exhaled long and slow, and for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. 6 months later, the house no longer felt like the same place. I had every stick of furniture hauled out and replaced new linen slip-covered sofas the color of sea foam, pale oak floors, white marble counters that caught the light like water. I ripped out the heavy drapes and let the Gulf pour in through bare windows. Along the front walk, I planted a double row of white iceberg roses that bloomed so thick the air smelled like sugar at dusk. The locks were changed the same day they left. The security system was upgraded to military grade. The $4,000 monthly transfers to the Ohio account stopped the moment the bank cleared them. I never received a single thank you for the $480,000 I'd sent over 10 years. I no longer expected one. Blake's sentencing made the local news for 3 days. 18 years in federal prison, 12 for elder financial exploitation across state lines, 4 for wire fraud, 2 for attempted witness tampering after he tried to bribe Melissa Coleman from county jail. The judge called it one of the most calculated patterns of predation he'd seen in 20 years on the bench. No parole before year 15. He is 40 now. He will be nearly 60 when the gate opens. Courtney lost everything in the civil suits that followed. The banks came for the jointly signed loans Blake had taken in her name. Her Mercedes was repossessed in the Publix parking lot while she loaded groceries. The condo in St. Pete went into foreclosure. She now lives in a one-bedroom apartment off Dale Mabry Highway in Tampa, scans items at a Walmart supercenter, and takes the bus because her license is suspended for unpaid tickets. My parents sold the little ranch house in Columbus for less than they owed. The reverse mortgage and credit lines swallowed the equity whole. They moved into a low-income senior apartment outside Dayton, 2 small rooms, thin walls, a hot plate instead of a stove. Social Security and food stamps keep the lights on. Mom's Christmas card never came this year. Travis flies down every other month. We cook steaks on the grill, drink too much wine, and never mention the people who used to sit at that table. I still take my coffee on the same Adirondack chair facing west, but the view feels different now. The sunsets are the same fiery orange, the same gulls wheel over the water, but the weight in my chest is gone. Some evenings I bring a legal pad and write letters. I never send one to Melissa, thanking her for the courage to speak first, one to Margaret Ellison telling her the restitution fund finally came through, one to the detective who worked Sundays just to keep me safe. Sometimes I think about the word family and how strange it is that it can mean both the people who raise you and the people who try to bury you. I used to believe blood made forgiveness mandatory. I know better now. Cutting them out was not cruelty. It was surgery. The roses are in full bloom again. I walk the path every morning barefoot, letting the dew cool my feet. The house is quiet, paid for mine in every way that matters. I have friends who choose to be here, a brother who chooses to stay, and a future I finally get to design for myself. If you're watching this and someone in your life keeps taking pieces of you while calling it love, hear me, boundaries are not betrayal. Protecting your peace is not selfish. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is close the door, change the locks, and let the roses grow over the path they used to walk. Because real family doesn't steal your home to fix their mistakes. Real family doesn't need to be taught that you are not their retirement plan. I kept the house. I lost the guilt. And for the first time in 54 years, I am exactly where I belong. If you've ever been told that setting boundaries is selfish, this message is for you. Many of us were raised to believe that saying no means we have failed the people we love. We were taught to carry responsibility that was never ours, to remain silent when we felt hurt, and to confuse sacrifice with love. If you've lived with that burden, please know that you are not alone. You deserve respect. You have the right to say no without guilt. You have the right to protect your time, your peace, your finances, and your future. Choosing yourself does not mean abandoning others. It means recognizing that healthy relationships are built on honesty, mutual respect, and responsibility, not obligation or fear. Taking care of yourself is not the opposite of loving your family. In reality, it is the foundation of every relationship that can grow with trust and dignity. When you honor your own worth, you create space for healthier connections, wiser decisions, and a life that reflects your true values instead of someone else's expectations. If this story reminded you of a chapter in your own life, we invite you to share it in the comments. Your experience may encourage someone who is struggling to find the courage to protect their own peace. Sometimes a few honest words can become the beginning of another person's healing. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Your support, your kindness, and your willingness to reflect on these stories help build a community where people feel understood instead of judged. If you enjoyed today's story, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and explore more inspiring stories through the videos linked in the description below. Every story is a reminder that healing is possible, dignity is worth protecting, and every new beginning starts with one courageous decision. Until next time, never forget this. Protecting your peace is not selfish, it is one of the most important promises you can make to yourself.